Today's topic will be on the era of Reconstruction, spanning from the end of the Civil War to 1877. After the Civil War, the Republicans had control in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. However, radical and moderate Republicans still disagreed on the method of Reconstruction. The radical Republicans had two prominent leaders, Charles Sumner in the House and Thaddeus Stevens in the Senate. Sumner worked to promote racial equality, while Stevens defended blacks in court and led the Joint Committee on Reconstruction. There were three main issues for the party on Reconstruction. The radicals wanted a federal government intervention in the South. They wanted a large socioeconomic change, rather than small individual state changes. The moderates preferred the idea of self-government and did not want the people's rights to be modified. The one thing that both sides agreed on was giving blacks the right to vote. As a result of the riots and violence in the South, the Reconstruction Act was passed. It divided the South into 5 military districts that would be supervised by a Union general and restricted Confederates to vote. After this, readmission to the Union required ratifying the 14th Amendment for all citizens. This included giving black freemen the right to vote. The moderates influenced the laws made with the Reconstruction Act because there was no land or education provided with federal money for freed slaves. Moreover, they wished to create an electorate in the South that would vote to join the Union, making the federal government not responsible for Southern state action. Radical Republicans feared that once readmitted, the states would change their constitutions, so changes were made to the Constitution. The Civil Rights Bill was added to the 14th Amendment. The 15th Amendment was passed and stated that suffrage could not be denied on the basis of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The military rule in the South had negative consequences. It helped the president's responsibilities, but also was of dubious legality. This means that practices of questioning legality were happening. For example, Ex parte Milligan stated that the military tribunals couldn't try citizens. However, the opposite happened. The Supreme Court didn't oppose this because of the Republican Congress. By 1870, most Southern states had written their constitutions. The Union military began to loosen its grip in the South and eventually turned over leadership to the Republicans. However, once the military officially left in 1877, white redeemers came into power. This group promoted white supremacy and were extremely democratic. At the same time, suffragists were disappointed with the passages of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Many of them opposed slavery, but women's suffrage was not given the same attention. They protested the 14th Amendment because it only allowed males to vote and wanted to change the 15th to add to no discrimination of voting based on sex. In reality, the 14th Amendment was hesitantly passed by Congress. The president had only thought of giving suffrage to freedmen who had military service, land, or education as a prerequisite. Many white Southerners were being denied suffrage because of Confederate ties, so it was evident that there was a need for a black voting population. Moreover, many white Southerners found it hypocritical that freedmen were given the right to vote so sparsely when the North enforced the law strictly. Having gained suffrage, black males began to form political groups. One such group was the Union League. Assisted by black Northerners, those in the South would advocate the importance of voting and civic duties. These issues would be brought to schools, churches, and government employers. With the onset of African American communities, black women began to take on a role. They would attend rallies and participate in informal votes at conventions. Furthermore, there was a growth of African Americans in the government throughout Reconstruction. They would be the structure of the community and would delegate between white political figures. White Southerners hated the idea of freedmen holding office and blamed scalawags and carpetbaggers. Scalawags were white Southerners that supported radical parties and were accused of ruining the South. Carpetbaggers were Northerners who moved south for the economic profit in rebuilding. The pros of radical government in the South was that it was able to create public schools, a tax system, public works, and property rights for women. However, with the pros came the cons of whites taking advantage of inexperienced blacks in government. Using government money to pay for individual expenses was a common practice in Louisiana and South Carolina. The Ku Klux Klan was a white supremacist group that rose to power in 1866. They would initially scare blacks at their houses in the night, but soon unleashed acts of great violence, especially towards those who fought back. The Force Acts were passed to combat the Klan, but they had already instilled terror in the South. The goal of the group was to prevent the corruption of blacks in politics, as shown through their restrictions on blacks voting through literacy tests. Radicals were fed up with President Johnson's attitude towards Reconstruction and decided to find a way to impeach him. The Tenure of Office Act of 1867 was passed and stated that the Senate had to approve of dismissals that the president gave to appointees. This was aimed to keep Stanton, a secret radical supporter, in the White House. When Johnson abruptly dismissed him, the context for impeachment was ready. Johnson's impeachment trial sold 1,000 tickets, but the crowd was disappointed because of his cool attitude. His argument was that the dismissal of Stanton was a test to Supreme Court for the unconstitutional act. Johnson was pronounced not guilty because of the lack of an opposing argument. Johnson won the trial by a margin of 1 vote. However, there were many contributing factors to his unexpected decision. Many people did not want to destabilize the presidency and ruin checks and balances. Furthermore, they did not want Benjamin Wade, who was pro-president, to succeed him. Johnson promised to stop avoiding Republican policies if he was in office. The decision was for the better because it demonstrated the maturity of the nation and how, if impeached, the weak country wouldn't have survived an uprising or weakening of the federal government. Russia had the intent to sell Alaska to America because of minimal economic profit and an ally against Britain. Secretary of State Seward purchased Alaska for $7.2 million, but the treaty was nicknamed Seward's Folly because of the insignificance of the land. However, Congress allowed for the purchase because of the natural resources and diplomacy to the Russian Tsar in return for support in the Civil War. Overall, Reconstruction was a hindrance to white Southerners. They did not appreciate the federal intervention and increase of blacks in politics. However, it was somewhat effective in developing the South. The Republican Party suffered losses after their failure to sustain freedmen rights. In addition, moderate Republicans never appreciated the efforts, and if it weren't for greater federal involvement in the South, racism may not have been as deep set as it was or is today.